Hey there, I'm Jake from Fablebound, and I'm asking for all brave adventurers to join me on a thrilling journey through the dark and twisted lore from Descent into Avernus. So wet your blades and ready your spells for the Nine Hells, as this story will set the stage for the epics that await us in Baldur's Gate 3. And if you're currently playing Descent into Avernus, maybe check in with your DM before watching. Our story begins on the outer plane of Mount Celestia, or the Seven Heavens, where the angel Zariel spoke out against her peers for not getting involved in the Blood War. An ancient conflict fought between fiends that dwelt on the lower planes, really just an almost infinite number of demons perpetually slaughtering each other in a war so massive that it spans multiple planes of reality. Zariel argued that it was the angelic host's responsibility to destroy evil wherever it reared its ugly head in the multiverse, rather than just sit back and watch the demons and devils destroy one another along with vast swaths of the multiverse with them. Zariel was under the command of the Morning Lord Lathander and was initially tasked with tracking the Blood War. But her prolonged exposure to this war left her not just rationalizing the need to put an end to this conflict, but it also developed within her an obsession with the war and a longing for the taste of battle. And so Zariel argued that an assault from the hosts of Celestia would eradicate the forces of both sides in the Blood War in a single stroke, and free the suffering parts of the multiverse in the process. Despite her arguments, however, her superiors would choose to remain neutral in this regard, and Zariel would be repeatedly forbidden from involving herself in the conflict. Her frustrations at the behest of her superiors would continue to build towards a breaking point. But when a demon named Jing-Nohu slaughtered a village that was under Zariel's protection, she would no longer stand by. Zariel left Mount Celestia and made her way to El Turel, a city in the western Heartlands and neighbor to Baldur's Gate. Here she rallied an army of Hellriders and trained them to fight in the Blood War, promising that when they were ready, she would lead them into Avernus itself and put an end to the demonic threat. And for some time, Zariel and the Hellriders would train, until late in the year 1354 DR, when Zariel deemed her army ready, and then she led them in an epic charge known as the Ride, headfirst into the Hells, where Bel, the ruler of Avernus and his infernal legions, awaited. Zariel's army would soon find itself outnumbered, and while many of her warriors fought bravely to their ends, the horrors of the Nine Hells would prove to be too overwhelming for many others still. And so they fled back through the portal to the material plane and sealed it behind them. A shameful act of betrayal that these Hellriders would never reveal, a badge of indignity that they would wear to their graves. Zariel would lose more than just the lives of those in her charge amidst the fighting on Avernus. She would also lose a hand, and as that hand was severed, her sword fell to the ground. Seeing that her army was lost and victory was nigh impossible, she ordered for her most trusted general Yael to take the blade and hide it, lest the devils would destroy or corrupt it. Yael took her master's sword along with Zariel's faithful Holophant companion Lulu and fled. Zariel's other two generals, Elanthius and Haruman, would refuse to leave her side, as the three of them were captured and transported to the lowest layer of the Nine Hells, Nessus. There, Zariel was brought before the Lord of the Nine Hells himself, Asmodeus, who welcomed her with open arms. Asmodeus was impressed with Zariel, commending her for the strength of her convictions and her prowess in battle. So much so that he offered to give her rulership of Avernus, much to Bel's displeasure, if she would swear fealty to the Lord of the Nine. He enticed her the opportunity to bring down the weight of her rage against the demons still and fight in the Blood War continuously, only this time with vast legions of demons and devils under her command. Zariel, always headstrong in her self-righteous wrath, agreed to these terms and pledged her allegiance to Asmodeus, thus completing her fall from the heavens and from grace. Her general Haruman would willingly follow her into damnation, and was transformed into a Narzugan devil for his loyalty. Elanthius, however, would rather take his own life than serve Asmodeus and be damned, and so he did. But Asmodeus' power far exceeded that of a mortal's would-be divine sacrifice, and so he raised Elanthius back to life to serve as a Death Knight under Zariel's burning gaze. Though she would continue to fulfill what she believed to be her purpose, to fight in the Blood War, one thing Zariel would never forget is the betrayal she endured at the hands of the Hellriders who turned and ran from the battlefield, sealing her behind on Avernus. Despite being preoccupied with the fighting among demons and fiends, Zariel would keep a close eye on Elturel, awaiting the day she could enact her revenge. And almost 100 years later, that day came. In 1444 DR, Elturel would discover that its leader, or High Rider as they called it, was actually a vampire, with a vast network of undead and charmed collaborators he would use to occupy the city. The Hell Riders fought fiercely to rid their city of the vampire and his undead minions, but for every victory they achieved during the day, at night they would lose twice over. Elturel's losses in the night would be so devastating that it's said the citizens prayed to the gods each night just to ask for the dawn to come sooner. One such citizen's prayers would be answered. A priest of Torm named Thavius Krieg appealed to any power to help save his holy city, and would take credit for what came next. During a night in which it seemed that all would finally be lost, and the city would be completely overrun by the undead, a second sun appeared in the sky over the city of Elturel, turning night into day, leaving the vampire lord and his spawn as nothing but smoldering ash, while the rest of the undead cowered from the holy light. Thavius Krieg was hailed as the savior of Elturel, for without him, the companion, as the second sun would go on to be called, would not have bathed their city in holy light. But what Thavius did not reveal was that it was actually Zariel who emerged from a pillar of fire, offering him a deal to save the city that he readily agreed to. But this deal wasn't made out of the goodness of Zariel's heart, the opposite in fact. Part of that deal was that Thavius would know the exact day that the companion would cease to protect Elturel, and when that moment came, it would be dragged down into Avernus. Thavius used this information to plot and scheme even further. In the weeks leading up to Elturel's unknown but impending doom, Thavius invited Grand Duke Older Ravengard of Baldur's Gate to his city, so that the two may resolve the long-standing disputes and feuds between their two cities. Only after Thavius greeted Ravengard's delegation did he flee the city to watch from a safe distance as Elturel was ripped from the material plane and into Avernus along with its inhabitants, leaving only a crater behind where the holy city once stood. Over the coming days, refugees who managed to escape or not be in the city at the time of its collapse began to arrive at Baldur's Gate, Thavius being disguised as one such refugee. As rumors of Elturel's descent into Avernus began circulating, fear, chaos, and panic began to spread like wildfire in Baldur's Gate, a city already rife with the wrong sort to begin with. The Flaming Fist, a mercenary group hired by Grand Duke Older Ravengard to serve as the city's guard, would attempt to take control of and bring order to the city. Now is when things get a little tricky with the story, as here's where the campaign begins for tables playing it. The players take on the role of a group forced into volunteering for the Flaming Fist, but discover a whole twisting and shifting narrative about politics and Elturel, etc., etc. Ultimately, it's the party's undertaking to save Elturel and its people and bring the city back to the material plane. And there are myriad ways to do that, so there isn't just one specific story to tell here. But what we do know for sure, at least in Baldur's Gate 3 canon, is that the group of heroes does succeed in saving Elturel. If you've ever been a part of a table that's played Descent into Avernus, I'd love to hear how your group handled all the sticky situations and devilish temptations in the first layer of the Hells. Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this content, consider subscribing to the channel and giving this video a like. Thanks a bunch for watching, and I'll see you around the table. Oi! The Flaming Fist demands you subscribe to this channel. It's right here. Press it. Are you doing it? Go on now. Press it.